While many printers have shifted their focus, Freeport Press has remained committed to the art of print. For companies that need a printing partner for magazines, look no further than Freeport Press. We offer the capabilities a customer would expect from a national printer while offering the level of customer service clients expect from a family-owned business. Freeport Press. We do print, and we do it well.
FreeportPress.com.
It may be that you're small, you don't make much money, but you might make the most fantastic magazine in the world that I'm super excited by and want to send it out. You can see that the people who are involved in it are making this magazine because they love it and because there's something that they care very passionately about and they want to have that preserved in ink on paper. That, beyond any kind of definition of indie or not, that's what I'm looking for.
One of the things I've learned while hosting this podcast is that there are a lot of magazines out there, more than I imagined. Maybe I'm being obvious, but it also means that there was never a death of the magazine, quote unquote, simply a realignment of dollars and attention. If anything, there are more magazines being published than ever, but, and it's a big but, they're harder and harder to find. There are fewer magazine stores, there are almost no newsstands, at least in North America. And bookstores, well, okay, go to your local bookstore. I encourage it, actually, but good luck finding the magazine you want. Which brings us to Steve Watson. He worked in the industry, and he lived what was happening to it. And so he created Stack, which is essentially a discovery system or a club. Call it the Magazine of the Month Club. Join it, and you receive random independent magazines from around the world, chosen by Steve, or curated, let's use the overused word, curated by Steve. And if you like the magazine, great. Go out and subscribe to it, and you've just expanded your world. I asked Steve about the changes in the industry, how he builds community, and what the future of the magazine might be. He's an optimist, and that makes me feel good about things. My name is Arjun Basu, and this is The Full Bleed. So before we get into what you've done and why you did it, what's your background? What led you up to the moment where Stack exists?
At the point I started Stack, I was a magazine editor and writer. And at that point, I was editing the EasyJet in-flight magazine. So like the in-flight magazine for budget carrier over here. And that's both like a really fun job and a pretty soul-destroying job. On the one hand, you're flying off places and staying in nice hotels and stuff. And on the other hand, wherever you go, you've just got to say nice things about like everything that you see. And it's very dependent on the advertising team. Every September, we had to do a story about MBAs. I'm not sure there's another way to talk about MBAs. I was like looking around and I was getting worried because the only thing that I knew how to do was write and edit. And journalism was changing really fast. I remember like when I first started working in flights, I would sometimes try to get a kind of proper big name journalist writer to do something. And they'd just be like, no, why would I want to do that for an in-flight magazine? And by the time I finished, we were getting pitched on a regular basis by proper big name writers because obviously like journalism was just changing so fast. I wasn't a big name writer. What was I going to do? And so I basically started thinking like, can I give myself another like set of skills or thing to do by starting a business? And I bought a book called The Beer Mat Entrepreneur, which is all about how you go to the pub and you're sat talking with your friend and saying, oh, I've got this idea for this thing that I want to do. And how do you basically go from that to actually making it happen? And so I wrote like a few business plans that were probably like obvious nonsense and didn't come to anything. And then Stack was the first thing that sort of seemed to make some sense.
Let's describe Stack.
Okay. So Stack is a club. Every month I find a different independent magazine and deliver it to our subscribers around the world. And the idea is that they've got no idea what they're going to get next. That wasn't really meant to be a big part of the sell in the first place. That just came from, we need to make this an easy mechanism. I was still doing my journalism job when I started Stack. It was in December 2008, which I thought was in time for Christmas. It turns out that's not in time for Christmas at all. No. And that first delivery, I literally just carried a load of magazines and envelopes down to my local post office and bought a load of stamps, and the people in there hated me. They're like, what are you doing? This is not how you send stuff out like this. So basically, like, Stack, it's always been intended as a way to discover new stuff, like things that you wouldn't have come across yourself. And the whole like surprise element is a thing that like people who just responded to really well. A lot of our subscribers are like designers, or they work in like creative fields. They want to have a steady flow of inspiration coming across their desk. But then we've got just as many people who just want to see something interesting. They just want to find a thing that they wouldn't have come across. And so that's the service that we provide.
The use of the word club is obviously interesting because that implies not just membership, but community. That is a word and a trick that is used in marketing all the time. How much of a community is it as opposed to the second part, the latter people you describe, where they just want to find something fun and new and interesting?
The sort of people who want to receive this surprise magazine from us, they're like a self-selecting group. These are people who want to be part of this thing. I wish that I could do more to make it an actual club where we all come together. And we do put on events. Last Thursday, we were at the St. Bride Foundation here in London, and we put on a brilliant night with 4 independent magazines that each chose 2 writers to read their pieces on stage. We had a great time there, and then we all went to the pub next door afterwards. And that was a real visible community, people together in a room. The reality of like the fact that our subscribers are all around the world means that it's very hard to actually do that. We do a thing every month where we have the magazine club, and basically it's just a Zoom call where people are invited to watch me have a conversation with the people who made the last magazine that we sent out. So if you've just received this thing from us, really liked it, you want to know more, you can come to that and get the stories behind the stories. And we always try to encourage people to have their cameras on and to ask questions. And sometimes people do. Often people like to just sit behind their black screen, and that's understandable too. I would say we don't do as much to make this a real actual club as I'd like, but I think we're probably doing about as much as we like realistically can, given that this whole thing runs on a shoestring.
We'll talk about that in a bit, but I'm curious how you choose the magazines that you send out every month. What's the criteria?
So the main thing, as I say, is people want to be surprised. So I have to make sure that when I'm planning the year out, we don't hit the same subject matter more than once. Let's say, for example, we just sent a food magazine out, and there's another really brilliant food magazine that I really love. I'm going to hold off on sending that for, say, 6, 8, 12 months because I want to make sure that people are getting something different each time. Once you've adjusted for that in terms of the variety, in terms of subjects, I also try to make sure there's a variety in terms of where in the world the magazines are coming from. I think it's nice to have a variety in terms of if we've just been like really text heavy with something, try to be a little bit more visual, just to keep changing it up. Once you've added all of that in, it honestly chooses itself. The magazines that we're working with, there are lots of them, but most of them don't publish very frequently. So most of them are publishing maybe like once a year, twice a year. When you plan the year out and say, okay, these people are publishing here, they're publishing here, the year draws itself, basically.
You are on the independent magazine side of the spectrum of things. What makes an independent magazine independent?
That is a really good question. So I go to a conference every year called IndieCon. It's held in Hamburg. And it's an opportunity for independent publishers to all come together from all around the world. And the first one, I think I'm right in saying, was in 2014. And the entire weekend was dedicated to the question, was ist Indie? So they basically tried to put their heads together and come up with this definition, because you're right, it's very tricky. And actually, there wasn't a single definition that came out of that weekend. But the best thing that I heard there was the chiefs are the makers. So basically, the people who are financially responsible for making this magazine are also directly involved in writing or laying out pages or taking photos. And I think that when you take that as your definition, it's not perfect. You get like the Monocle problem. Is Monocle an independent magazine? In some ways, absolutely yes. In some ways, absolutely no. So according to this definition, I would say yes, Monocle is independent because Tyler Brûlé has got skin in the game on that magazine, and he's also clearly very directly involved in the editorial of the whole company. And so I think that's useful because also it helps to take away the misconception of indie as just meaning somehow not quite as good. We're an indie magazine, or we don't make any money, or we're an indie magazine, or we're really small. Like, it may be that you're small, you don't make much money, but you might make the most fantastic magazine in the world that I'm super excited by and want to send it out. So I think that definition helps to kind of take away some of those misconceptions.
I'm just comparing it to music, for example. Depeche Mode was an indie band until they weren't. It's not because their music changed. REM, all of those bands, Nirvana, that was an indie band until they weren't, and it had something to do with their reach. Movies, it seems to be a bit more clear-cut in terms of the studio system, but I don't think there is an obvious... I'm going to have to think about what their definition is in terms of the skin in the game, because that's an interesting way of looking at it.
The other thing I'd say about indie in magazines is you know it when you see it. It is very difficult to define it, but when you pick a magazine up and you can see that the people who are involved in it are making this magazine because they love it and because there's something that they care very passionately about, and they want to have that preserved in ink on paper, that beyond any kind of definition of indie or not, that's what I'm looking for. When you can just sense the kind of passion and dedication coming through something, obviously that doesn't mean that it's going to be a good magazine, but I do think that's a very good filter to put in place to see if you are going to get something good.
Like Condé Nast couldn't do an indie magazine even if they made it look indie.
Exactly.
Although they could obviously make a good magazine. So you're in a good position, I think, to comment on the industry and what you've seen. You were in it. It's changed a lot. What are you seeing now? What's your quick response?
So obviously there's always been food magazines, but I think there's a real interest at the moment in food magazines as in hospitality and the people who are working to make all of this happen. In fact, the magazine that we just sent out this month on Stack, have I got my copy here? Yeah, here we go. So this is the February delivery. It's called Piscine, and it is published in Glasgow. It's an arts and culture magazine in Glasgow, but all of the people who work on that magazine work full-time in the city's bars and restaurants. And the theme of...
There's one in New York now called...
I was just going to say, I also have Waiting looking around here as well. I was just emailing with Elliot earlier today. And what is it? Is that because we've all seen The Bear and we're suddenly like interested in it? Or is it because I guess food was like that kind of archetypal Instagram content where it's the cliche, people like taking photos of their food, but obviously that only gets you so far. So now are we trying to get deeper into this and understand the mechanics of how it all works? These are the things that I think independent magazines do really well, because all of these magazines, no matter how small they are, they want to bring you into their world and show you how they see things and give you that very intimate, quiet experience. I think that there are lots of things they don't do very well. That's one of the things they do very well.
Food is interesting, and there's a lot more food adjacent, food anthropology almost. And travel magazines also are branching out, let's just say. And you mentioned Instagram, and I think that's an important part of it, because those are two subjects that overrun Instagram, if your algorithm lets it. And so the reaction has been to get very specific in those areas. Whereas old travel magazines, they had a demographic that they were catering to, but there were general interest magazines that happened to focus on travel. And now travel magazines get very specific. And then you have where travel and food intersect, something like Fare, for example. What is it? Is it a travel magazine or is it a food magazine? I don't know. And I think they're all reactions to what digital has wrought.
Absolutely. And I think they're also reactions to that 20th century model of magazine publishing, which I think we all still now, 25, 26 years into the 21st century, we're all still living in the shadow of the 20th century. And that kind of expectation of this is what a magazine should be. A magazine should have X many thousand subscribers because that's a proper business. That's how you do a magazine. And then the magazines that I work with, they're not real. They're like playing somehow. And I think that we're in the wild west of this now. We're in this epochal shift between the mass media age that depended on print and into this new mass media age that is digital, where everything's becoming atomized. You said before, like your algorithm, your Instagram algorithm is different to mine. So we see different things. And I think that these magazines are a response to that. Like, okay, we can't make a big magazine with tens or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but we can make this smaller thing that could still be a sustainable business and still gives us this way of sharing the world. I look at Piscine, and this is the same magazine as you look at when you read it. I think there's something valuable there in this kind of shared experience of the world.
I think there's a renaissance. There's two things happening. One is a reaction to trust and what we can see on screen, and now with AI, if we can really trust anything we see or hear or read. But the other thing is, I think there's a fatigue because of the relentlessness of our digital feeds and our lives, the way we live them. People are coming back to a certain extent to magazines. It's not just nostalgia. It's not under the term analog that we hear a lot. We hear people wanting human touch events and things. So what is it?
Good question. Look, I totally agree. I think probably nostalgia is involved to a degree, and that's no bad thing. When it comes to the question of trust, I think it really helps. We all know implicitly that print is archival. And if you print a magazine, you stick it on the shelf, that thing's going to stay there for longer than you're alive. Well, once that exists in the world, it's in the world. So it means that there isn't that immediate deniability that we just see across so much of the world now, where one side says one thing, the other side says another, and everyone can just call the others liars. If you've written something and printed it and it's on record, then that's there. And I think that also means that as the editor, we've all been in that position where you're about to send something to print and you check and check again and make it as perfect as you can. So I think that all of that really helps with the trust. When you publish something online, it can just be changed or taken away, or a server degrades and then that doesn't exist anymore. So I think that's something that we're becoming more and more aware of. I think the other side is, and again, I think this is to do with the fact that we're literally living through this in the moment and we're not able to step back from it and see, but there's all this anxiety at the moment with attention spans going down, young people not able to focus on something. But honestly, when I'm reading on screen, I'm probably trying to get through to the useful bit or the thing that I want, because that's how reading on screen works. You have a single linear top to bottom scroll that encourages you to just quickly try to, and the internet is built for speed. It's built for delivering you as quickly and efficiently as possible this piece of information. Whereas The printed page, and particularly the magazine page, has been designed to lead your eye in. And I think that's where you get the relaxing experience. There's a piece of research that was done by Xerox in, I think, 1996, The Coming Age of Calm Technology. In that paper, they're talking about computers are getting smaller, and there's going to come a point where all computers are talking to each other, and they're going to need to talk to us as well, and that will be completely overwhelming. So we need to come up with this thing, calm technology, and they define it as technology where the focal point is able to move from the center to the periphery and back again. Because the point that the researchers were making was our brains have this enormous capacity for processing peripheral information. You don't have to think about what's happening around you. It's just there. And in the paper, the experience of reading the New York Times on a Sunday morning, and how like you open that up, and without trying to focus on any one part of it, your brain just in the same moment takes in like the picture and the headline and like maybe a tiny caption down here and like the font and everything. That technology, the printed magazine, has been with us for 300 years, and it has slowly evolved over time to work with the way that our brains function. Whereas our phones and our computer screens have been with us for like 20 to 30 years. And we've just been told, like, look, this is the way this works. Get the information quickly. So much of our anxiety about today and like the speed of it and our lack of contact, I think, comes down to the way that we experience the world through these screens. And by the way, that's absolutely not to say that like screens are bad. I spend like all day looking at a screen. Like, it's very useful, but it's a tool for a specific job. And when I get to the end of the day and I want to relax and I want to like ease into a story, I would much rather be reading that on paper than reading it on screen.
Every marketing deep dive has shown that the engagement of print is off the chart screens, because the screen is, like you said, it's about delivering quantity as opposed to quality.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Jeremy Leslie at Mag Culture. We're proud to support The Full Bleed because we love magazines too. Visit magculture.com and see why print is far from over. It's just getting started. Read the journal for interviews and reviews, listen to our podcasts, visit our shop in London and online, and come to our live events in London and New York. We love magazines. Subscribe to our newsletter for weekly updates, all at magculture.com.
Print is Dead is made possible by the support of the Society of Publication Designers. The SPD powers the future of visual storytelling, setting the standard for editorial excellence and shaping the future of visual culture. For more information, visit spd.org.
And one of my favorite notions of this is that on Netflix, a lot of the scripts now, a character has to basically say the plot every once in a while so that people remember, because they're not just watching the movie, they're also on their phones or their laptops or whatever, and they're going all over the place. So they have to reiterate the plot point, like how we got to this point, over and over again. And it's changed screenwriting. That's like the main difference between a movie that is written for Netflix and a movie that is written for the big screen, because of the attention. Magazines, anything in print, the engagement is higher. And yet, like you say, we are all on screen. We're doing this on screen now, and it's the only way we could do it. How different is the industry now? You've been doing this now for almost 20 years. I don't want to make you feel old, but that's how long you've been doing it. And that's a long time in anything. Any media that lasts that long is doing something. So how has it changed, do you think?
I see the similarities. Way back when I first had the idea for Stack, I was writing for a magazine called Little White Lies, which is a movie magazine. Back then, they didn't have money to pay writers, so instead you just got invited to the party when it launched. And we became really good friends. I went to their weddings, they came to my wedding. We're still in touch now. And when I ran the event and the guys from Piscine were there and they'd come down from Glasgow, seeing them with each other was like I remember it was when we were making Little White Lies together, and you're working with people who you like really respect and you really have a great time doing it together. And I think that's still the thing. That's the thing that I get excited about when I read it on the page. And that's what I want to share. While so much of the world has fundamentally changed in the last 20 years, I think that core thing, the thing that makes a piece of print interesting to me, is absolutely still the same.
So then maybe I can ask that question in a different way. What have you learned in the past, 18, I'll be fair.
18 years.
Or what has surprised you even? Learned, surprised?
I think one of the things I've learned, and I guess this is probably more about running a business than it is about print necessarily. I've learned that there's never a silver bullet. There's never the one thing that you have to do and then everything will be different. I know that intellectually, but I don't know that emotionally. And I can't help myself going, oh, but what if we could do this thing? That would change everything. Like that would be the thing. And actually, I think on the flip side to that, actually what you need to do is just keep on turning up and doing it and try to figure out like, what is it that people are responding to? Don't get obsessed with analytics. Obviously that can be interesting, useful, but don't try following. Instagram says that it wants you to do like short form video. So like immediately do short form video. It's more like trying to figure out what's the thing that I can do like genuinely and sincerely and think that I'm doing something useful or entertaining or whatever it is, and just trying to stay on track to do that thing. I think that's the only thing that I've kept doing over the last 18 years.
Just showing up is a great business lesson, actually. Just show up and do it. Stack, what's the future look like for Stack? You're pursuing new initiatives. You aren't just a magazine club. You have podcasts. You started a new newsletter. So what's up there?
I didn't do video podcasts for ages because it made me really angry that Spotify and YouTube had decided they want to get their fingers in that. But honestly, I just found that our podcast, it wasn't doing what it used to do. I think there comes a time where you say, okay, the world has changed, so I need to change now. And like I put up the whole episode of all of our video podcasts. I'm pretty certain about 8 people in the world have actually watched one of those things all the way through. Who would sit and watch a whole podcast? I don't understand. But the thing that the video has given us is like short, shareable content. That's what was driving me mad before. You put all this time and effort into having conversation with somebody, and I want to then tell as many people as I can about this thing. And I felt like things had shifted in such a way that I put the podcast up and then it just faded away. There was nothing there. Whereas now I pull out a couple of like short shareable video bits, and that goes on like Instagram and YouTube Shorts and TikTok. And actually that makes a difference. There's more of a response from that. So that has been like a valuable thing to learn. And it involves me doing something that I'm not necessarily thrilled by, but fine, it's right for the project. The newsletter that we started, I was frustrated by the fact that there are so many great magazines out there. And with Stack, we get to share 12 of them over the course of an entire year, which is not enough. And the idea was to start a new thing that allowed us to extend the reach. I choose 2 stories per week and send them out via email. We use Beehive for that, which is like really super simple. There's no algorithm in there. It's not playing the Substack game, basically. And I'm really pleased with what we've done in terms of the stories that we've shared. There's great stuff in there that's really gratifying to see it in front of more people. I thought at the beginning it would be hard to get people to pay for it because I know that I don't pay for many newsletters. I'm pretty careful about that. But I did think it would be easy to get people to sign up for it because with Stack, I'm used to saying it's £12 a month, $20 a month. So I thought, we've got loads of great stories here and you can have them for free. Just sign up. And that's been way harder than I expected. And to be honest, our conversation today talking about digital fatigue and the difference between reading something in print and digital, that is probably a good indication for why that is so hard. But I still think that there is value in making it super easy for someone to see this great story from an independent publication. That's another nudge in the right direction towards, okay, maybe I'll go and read this magazine in a shop. Or next time in a shop and I see it, I'm at least familiar with what it is. So I think it's playing a part. I'm used to working in print and that's tough. And it turns out that working in digital is also tough.
All media is tough. We have the video conversation here from time to time. The irony of talking about digital fatigue in this medium when I know how it's being delivered to people. Podcasts went from being radio to talk shows, right? They're talk shows now, at least on video, that's what they've become. So everything's fluid. I guess I always think magazines are magazines. I wonder what the future is. You talked about this shift that you've noted in food and travel, for example. We never know what the future looks like until that change happens. But what is bubbling underneath in terms of the magazine industry, do you think?
Earlier, when I talked about the food magazines, that was me going super specific on a thing I've noticed recently. I'd say a broader kind of trend that I've seen more like over the last decade is I see more magazines these days which are smaller, lighter, made with thinner paper. And you can see the sort of logic of it. Back in the days of like Serial and Kinfolk, when the cliche of the independent magazine was like this big, heavy object with beautiful thick paper, loads of white space, I think that was just people responding to what had happened to magazines as a whole, where magazines had consistently got like smaller, thinner. Tyler Brûlé has that thing about the consultants coming in and saying, oh, it's fine, just reduce the GSM by 20 grams. It'll be exactly the same. But obviously every reader picks that magazine up and goes, oh, this is not as good as what it used to be. So at that point, a lot of independent magazine makers were saying, I just want to make the most beautiful thing with the thickest paper. And I feel like now we've moved further over towards, we're in a world now where I think people are more aware of the environmental impacts of what they're making. Paper is more expensive. We all are much more aware of the emissions taken to move a thing around the world. So I think that all of that contributes towards the idea that someone might want to make a smaller, lighter thing. And that's actually really interesting because then it comes down to, so what are the ideas? If we're taking some of the attention away from the physical production of the magazine, if I think of, say, for example, The Fence, a magazine that's like really flying over here at the moment, that's like super simple production, saddle stitch, silk stock. All the value is in the writing and the illustrations. And I find that really exciting. So I guess maybe we'll see that as a path that we continue down over the next few years.
Yeah, I could say a lot about what you just said. But the other thing is the cost of shipping.
It's huge. It's ridiculous. And it just continues.
A lot of people I've spoken to on this show in the past few years will bring up distribution or shipping at one point because it's just become so impossible. Consumers never paid for the cost of a magazine anyway, but they really did not pay for the cost of shipping, ever. You sub to a magazine and it just magically appeared, but when you really broke down what you were paying for it, there's no way that they were even covering the shipping with that subscription.
To get like dark for a minute, I think that this is also part of a broader trend. I grew up in a world where it was just expected that you would be able to move across borders. Growing up as someone in Britain, I thought that I could go pretty much wherever I wanted in the world. Running Stack, I could send my magazines wherever I wanted in the world. And that is really changing at a rate of knots. It could be like Donald Trump putting tariffs on stuff coming to the US. It could be the EU introducing the VAT. At the moment, EU countries individually are deciding whether they want to add an extra charge on top of. And all of this stuff for a small business like ours, can't tell you how much time we spent putting everything in place to jump through the hoops for the EU so that we could send our magazines to our customers and they wouldn't be charged on the doorstep. And we spent a load of money on it and people still got charged on the doorstep because the system wasn't in place. And so we lost loads of subscribers through that. It got better, but now we're seeing it happening again because we've got this thing of the country deciding whether they want to put charge on stuff. And it honestly is so frustrating. It's so regressive because nobody can give you an answer about what's happening. And I do feel like we're living in this age where the grown-ups all seem to have left the room. In the meantime, a bunch of small businesses are going to suffer. It's genuinely really tough.
Speaking of other countries, what countries are doing interesting things in the magazine world right now?
Gosh, in China, there's just the most fantastic print and production. And so, like, I feel like whenever I go off to an international conference or something, there'll be a Chinese-made magazine which has just got the most beautiful hand finishing or print process or something. That's a real advantage. They also then have, okay, if I'm complaining about the EU, like they have a much more repressive system they're working with. So that brings its own problems. But I think when publishers over there can get around that system, there's great resources over there for them to make really good stuff. Eastern Europe and ex-Soviet countries, really interesting. Solomia in Ukraine at the moment, they're just doing amazing work, literally in a time of war.
Yeah.
The sort of thing that, again, I just never thought I would see this happening in Europe ever again. The assumption was like, that's all done, but we're really forgetting the lessons that we learned. And I think that Solomira are literally in it, but then there's stuff at the moment coming out of Estonia and like the Balkan countries, which is motivated very much by them trying to come to terms with what is our national identity, because Russia and Soviet times still plays such a strong role in that. And what does it mean for us to be so close to this big, aggressive neighbor? So, yeah, I mean, it's making for interesting stuff.
What's the magazine capital? Or is there one?
I'm sitting here in London, so I have this very parochial vision which says London, and London's definitely...
I don't think it's parochial. It does sound self-serving because you're there, but I would say it's London, but I want to hear why you think it is.
So we put an event on at St. Bride's last week, and that's literally like on Fleet Street in the basement. They've got amazing printing presses that were the printing presses that were being used in like the 18th century to make stuff. So there's a very direct connection there with the history of print. I would say as well that I'm totally bowled over by stuff that's coming out of America in general. I think that a lot of the most interesting, particularly more, not that they're literary magazines, but they have that kind of literary ambition. I'm thinking of like Broadcast or Mother Tongue. Oh gosh, N+1. New York clearly is like a massive hub, and London has that very long heritage of print. And I think that, yeah, America more generally, I think, is doing really great stuff at the moment.
What's your favorite magazine of all time?
There's the one that really got me into it in terms of like gave me my start, which is Little White Lies. And I think that Little White Lies is still running now with a different team. I think that Little White Lies of, what would that be, the mid-2000s, when Matt Pachensky was the editor, Paul Willoughby was the art director, Danny Miller was the publisher. I think the three of them were doing something really special at that point. Before that, I also really loved Zembla. I know that's one that gets mentioned a lot. I used to go to Magma, which was the shop near me. And at the back of each issue of Zembla, they'd have next issue coming on the date. And they were always just like fantastically late with it. And I'd go in and, is it there yet? Is it there yet? And that anticipation of waiting for something and then devouring it on the way home, that's a very strong magazine memory.
What are the 3 magazines that you recommend now?
I just mentioned Broadcast. I think that they do a genuinely, again, an amazing job. And I think it's interesting with them that, so they're published by Pioneer Works in Brooklyn, and the whole point of the entire space, I've never been there, but it's kind of an arts venue. They have writing and musical residencies. They put on exhibitions and talks and stuff. And then they publish a huge amount of stuff online. And the whole organization is run by artists and scientists. And so the whole kind of point of it is basically bringing that together to help people see the world differently. And the magazine, I think, is just so well judged and well done. What else do I think is great? Again, I've mentioned them already. N+1, I think, are doing like amazing work. And I've got my subscription over here. And I know that when that magazine arrives, that's going to be me for a good few hours. There's a lot of value in that. And then I'm going to say Piscine as my third one, because it's like total opposite of those two. If those two magazines are run by organizations with people who've been doing it for a long time and they have a whole kind of machinery behind them, Piscine is just the bunch of friends getting together and doing something scrappy, beautiful because they love it. And yeah, I think that's something that I really want to help more people see.
It's been great. I encourage our listeners to visit Stack. The links are on our website. Steve, thank you for the conversation.
Thanks so much, Ashen.
This has been The Full Bleed, a podcast about the future of magazines and the magazines of the future, and a production of Magazeum LLC. This episode was produced by Patrick Mitchell. The theme music was composed and played by Jason Camelot. If you'd like to comment on this show, send an email to hello@magazeum.co or visit our website at magazeum.co, where you can read transcripts of all of our interviews from all of our podcasts, along with portfolios, archival photos, links, and more. You can also tell us what the mags you miss. Just fill out the form on the website. Once a month, we'll select the name of a lucky person, and they could win some fine swag. Speaking of which, we have a swag shop. My name is Arjun Basu. Thanks for listening.